All right, let's dive into something huge today, our justice system. Well, forever, the main idea has been about punishment. But what if there's a better way? A way that doesn't just punish, but actually makes our communities safer for real? That all starts with one big question.
So, here it is. The US has one of the highest incarceration rates in the entire world. The thinking has always been, lock more people up and crime goes down. Simple, right? But is that really true? Does it actually make us safer? That's the core question we're going to unpack right now.
Okay, so to even begin to answer that, we've got to look at the system we have right now. It's all built on a pretty specific idea of what justice is supposed to be, an idea that, honestly, most of us just assume is the only way to do things.
And that idea, it's called retributive justice. The central concept is super straightforward. If you break a law, you get punished. Simple as that. Think an eye for an eye. This is the bedrock of our legal system, really, for everything from a speeding ticket all the way up to the most serious crimes.
They say the questions you ask really shape the answers you find, and that is so true here. The whole focus of retributive justice is revealed in the questions it asks. What rule got broken? Who's to blame for it? And what punishment do they deserve? Just notice, all of those questions are looking backwards. They're all about blame and penalty.
So the big question is, does this approach actually work to stop future harm? Well, let's take a look at a real-world example. In Travis County, Texas, before they tried something new, the 10-year average for kids who committed a violent offense and then did it again was 50%. 50! That's literally a coin flip. And that makes you stop and think, right? If half the kids are reoffending, is a system that's all about punishment really working?
Exactly. And that very question is what's pushing people to think about justice in a totally different way. What if we just started asking a different set of questions? Once you do that, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities that go way beyond just punishment.
Okay, so two of the most exciting alternatives out there are restorative justice and transformative justice. Restorative justice, it changes the focus from the rule that was broken to the relationship that was broken. The goal is all about repairing the harm that was done to people and the community. Then you have transformative justice, which takes it even one step further. It looks at the situation and asks, wait a minute, what was going on in our society that let this happen in the first place? And then it tries to change those bigger systems.
And this makes the difference so clear. Just look at how the questions change. Instead of what rule was broken, restorative justice asks, who got hurt? Instead of who's to blame, it asks, okay, who has a responsibility to help fix this? And then transformative justice goes even deeper, asking about the social conditions, about how we can prevent this from ever happening again. It's amazing, really. When you change the question, you change everything. Now, this isn't just some academic theory. Nope. These ideas are being put to the test in the real world. So let's head back to Travis County, Texas, and see what actually happened when they decided to start asking these new questions. So back in 2021, the district attorney, Jose Garza, kicked off something called the Travis County Transformation Project. And his vision was really clear. He said, let's develop a community-based program rooted in restorative justice principles to prevent children from entering the juvenile justice system. The goal was to stop the cycle before it even got worse. They partnered up with a national nonprofit called Fuse, and the goal was nothing short of a complete paradigm shift. Instead of just punishing a kid for doing something wrong, they would get everyone together, the young person, their family, the people who were harmed, and they'd work to figure out, okay, what went wrong here, and how do we actually make it right? So remember this number, 50%. That was the old system's recidivism rate, a 50% failure rate. That was the number they were up against. Okay, get ready for this. After the very first year of the transformation project, the recidivism rate for the kids in that program was 4%. Just 4. Let that sink in for a second. It went from 50% all the way down to 4.
Look at that. That is a 92% improvement. This isn't just a small adjustment. It's a monumental shift in what's possible. It really suggests that when you focus on repairing harm instead of just punishing it, you can actually break that cycle of violence.
So, why? Why was it so successful? What explains this incredible change? Well, to get that, we have to talk about the difference between just treating a symptom and actually solving the root problem.
The concept is called root cause analysis, and the idea is pretty simple. To really truly solve a problem, you can't just patch up the surface level issue. You have to dig deeper. It's all about shifting your focus from who is responsible to how and why did this happen. The sources we looked at use this really powerful metaphor.
Think of injustice like a weed. The crime, the thing we see, is just the part sticking out of the ground. But the real problem? That's the root system buried underneath. Things like poverty, lack of opportunity, historical inequality, all the stuff that lets that weed just grow right back. A punitive system just keeps mowing the lawn. A transformative system tries to pull the whole thing out by the roots.
And researchers have broken these root causes down into 3 big areas that are all connected. First, you've got cultural injustice. That's stuff like stereotypes and biased ideas. Then there's structural injustice, which is inequality that's literally built into our systems. Think unequal schools or unfair housing policies. And finally, interpersonal injustice, which is the direct discrimination people face every day. All 3 of these things work together to create the conditions where harm is just much more likely to happen.
Okay, so if the results are this amazing and the logic seems to make so much sense, you're probably asking, why aren't we doing this everywhere? And that's a great question. The answer is that changing a system this massive faces huge resistance, and sometimes in ways you wouldn't expect.
One of the biggest hurdles is something researchers have called penal welfarism. It's basically a rhetorical strategy where the existing prison system starts using the language of care and social services not to really change, but to justify why it should keep existing. It makes the argument that prisons are actually the best place to provide things like mental health care or job training. Right, the whole strategy is to position carceral state actors as medical experts uniquely well-suited to provide care to the vulnerable. See what that does? It justifies the system itself instead of changing it. It allows the system to absorb all the criticism and say, hey, we're the solution, which blocks real community-based reforms. It's basically a way of saying, we don't need fewer prisons, we just need better prisons.
So where does all this leave us? Well, it brings us right back to the beginning, really. It brings us back to what communities themselves, especially the ones hit hardest by crime, are actually asking for when they talk about what makes them feel safe.
And research from the Brookings Institution here is just incredibly telling. When they went into communities with high crime rates and asked people, what would make you safer, they didn't just say more cops or tougher sentences. They talked about the fundamental building blocks of a healthy community: clean neighborhoods, housing they can afford, programs that lead to real jobs, and mentorship for their kids.
And really, that leads us to our final big question. The evidence we've seen today, from the incredible success in Travis County to what people in these communities are literally telling us they need, it all points in one direction. It all comes down to this. If the root causes of crime are systemic, shouldn't our solutions be systemic too?